You burn one Terran listening post and they'll come back with a doctrine that rewrites your stars. The room recoiled. Not from the words themselves, but from the weight Emperor Salkar Thun placed behind them. His voice didn't shout. It struck, like a control rod slamming into a fusion core. Seated in a semicircle carved into black stone, 12 robed advisors instinctively adjusted their neural circlets, as if trying to recalibrate what they'd just heard. Archseer Vorin narrowed his upper eye ridges and leaned forward, fingers steeped in ritual rings. You speak of humans as if they are more than noise beneath graviton storms, he said flatly. We crushed the Delcarans in 6 weeks. Earth is younger than their oldest data towers. Thun's eyes didn't blink. You didn't crush the Delcarans. You occupied a race that yielded. There's a difference. He rose from the dais. Beneath his robes, his psionic lattice crackled with the friction of strained discipline. His implant's subdermal nodes sparked faintly near his temples, as if his nervous system was trying to reject the situation he was being forced to endure. A low chime signaled the chamber doors locking. Let me be clear, Thun continued, scanning the assembly. Terran cognitive resilience is mapped differently. They don't respond to force with force. They respond with strategy, rage, and a memory that doesn't dim. Every punitive action becomes their blueprint for retaliation. Vorin waved a hand, dismissing the warning with the flourish of a politician who thought his throne inevitable. Yet they signed the Delcaran Neutrality Accords. What threat do they pose when they honor treaties? The council chuckled softly. Thun did not. The only reason Earth signed the accords was to buy time, not peace. No one laughed after that. The obsidian walls around them seemed to tighten, not acoustically, but with the tension of an empire poised to gamble. Glyph screens around the chamber flickered with intelligence feeds. Trade maps, colony projections, Terran patrol routes. One screen showed Earth's outpost HFY, a station floating near the Lurian corridor, barely guarded, tethered to a slim logistic spine. Vorin tapped his cane twice. Order in chamber. Let the record show that the Emperor fears retaliation from a world that still uses chemical propellants in some of its combat fleets. Thun stepped down from the central platform, cloak trailing like oil in water. He didn't argue further. He didn't need to. He simply turned to leave. By the time the meeting ended, Vorin had submitted an authorization code to the Cipher Naval Division. Operation Edgeglass, a targeted strike on HFY, was greenlit, without even a vote. No declaration, no summons, just coordinates sent, weapons primed, and the Dominion's pride aimed at a quiet corner of space. 7 minutes later, Outpost HFY no longer existed. Fusion-tipped darts pierced its defense web before its automated distress systems could route through the L4 beacon. Docked freighters ignited from the inside out. An auxiliary oxygen ring collapsed into itself, sending bodies drifting into open space, limbs frozen mid-magnet. Inside Control Deck A, one operator's final act was reaching toward a blinking data unit, his fingertips still singed against the console edge when recovery drones found them weeks later. All 112 Terran personnel perished. None were armed. None had orders to respond to aggression. No footage ever returned. The feeds died as fast as the hull ruptured. 3 days after the assault, a Dominion-wide broadcast pulsed across primary relay chains. The Vichwari declared Earth in violation of unauthorized expansion, accusing its colonies of interfering with psionically sensitive zones adjacent to the Dominion's etheric fields. The punishment: an embargo on colony supply routes and a hard perimeter blockade around the Lurian corridor. On Calyx 4, ration sirens blared for the 4th consecutive morning. The colony dome was shaped like a crescent pod, built into the side of a mineral plateau. By now, the power conduits ran dry by rotation 4 each evening, leaving corridors dim and food dispensers offline. In a subterranean medical bay, Commander Dren Halveth paced the narrow steel floor of a war room no longer funded by Earth's Central Coalition. Dim red LEDs tracked his boots as he stopped beside a recessed console. His second-in-commander Tark Ven stood beside him, jaw clenched, listening as another logistics officer reported. Only 17 drones returned with partial cargo, the rest rerouted by unknown redirect protocols. Vaqueri jammed the orbital lanes again. Halveth didn't flinch. He lifted a cracked data slab. Vaqueri origin, recovered 2 years ago through a trade intermediary. He'd ignored it back then. Now, it lit up with fresh relevance. A cross-exit pattern showed the caste interlinks inside Vaqueri internal structure. The Loran caste diplomatic, resource-lined, the Cypher caste militant, paranoid. Both depended on the etheric nexus for coordination. And that system, Halveth had learned, could be manipulated. He exhaled, but not from stress, from focus. This fracture they hide, he muttered, tapping the node tree on the screen, is their weakness. The more they push, the faster that crack will spread. He didn't have ships. He didn't have an official war declaration. But what he had was data. A decade's worth of neglected intelligence embedded across Dominion systems. If used correctly, the Dominion wouldn't fall from bombs. It would collapse from within. On Vaqueri Prime, inside the communications chamber carved into a mountain base, Archseer Vorin stood at a glistening command table surrounded by Cypher officers. They watched a simulated model of Earth's colony network, confidence dripping from every flick of their gestures. The blockade works, one officer stated. 3 systems isolated. Civilian unrest expected within 5 days. Reinforce the embargo, Vorin commanded. Push humanitarian fleets out of neutral zones. If they respond, we escalate further. Another officer hesitated. And the Emperor's warnings? Vorin turned. Thune fears shadows. I fear momentum. And the humans are out of moves. From the shadows above, a recording light blinked once. In Earth's Sable Reach command vault, Halveth inserted the Vaqueri data slab into the encrypted dock. The interface pulled his retinal signature. On screen, a deep latticework of Dominion fleet behavior glowed, overlaid with political factions and adaptive threat markers. He leaned forward, speaking only once. Activate Theta. The screen went black. A second later, it began mapping sabotage protocols that had been sleeping for over a decade, waiting for someone to say the words. The activation command echoed in the Sable Reach vault. Just one word, spoken, yet enough to unchain an entire strategy. Theta. Commander Halveth stood motionless, eyes locked on the authentication strip as the slab's embedded encryption unwound with a hiss-like vapor against cold steel. Across the interface, Earth's dormant protocols awakened. Not alarms, not weapons, instructions, buried loops, forked logic trees, legacy subroutines disguised as obsolete trade filters. They began migrating through relay routers disguised as civilian shipping metadata. Years ago, those same lines had carried diplomatic offers. Now, they carried shutdowns. In the Vaqueri capital's logistics nerve, nested 3 floors beneath the psionic citadel, a control technician felt his interface delay half a second before registering his touch. He blinked. Nothing alarming. But when he switched to the resource pipeline dashboard, the allocation queue failed to populate. On his 3rd attempt, the screen simply froze. He called for a systems check. By the time the override team reached his post, 3 adjacent terminals had already gone dark. On day 1, it was interference. On day 3, it became malfunction. By day 5, it was accusation. On Vaqueri Prime, Emperor Salkar stood before the viewing chamber's outer window, where solar currents rolled across the shielded skyline like molten threads. Behind him, Advisor Jarn Thull waited in silence, the tension in his jaw visible from across the room. The Loran are being framed, Salkar said without turning. Thull replied quietly. The sabotage traces point to a Loran archive node in Sector 8B. That's because someone planted them there, the Emperor snapped, voice tightening like an airlock under strain. The Cypher are consolidating authority while the public panics. I need you to embed watchers inside Cypher deployments. Do not contact me once they're placed. Sol hesitated only a second, then nodded and left, boots clicking against the obsidian floor. In Earth's underground relay bunker on Calyx 4, the lighting flickered as auxiliary generators kicked in. Technician First Class Roan Vask checked Mira's relay scaffold with both hands, pausing only to shake ice from his cuffs. Mira Tan, wrapped in a rough weave thermal coat, hunched beside a tangle of fiber-spliced routing tubes. "These aren't salvaged for weather endurance," she muttered, tapping one conduit's brittle edge. "They weren't built to bend this far either." "We don't have much else to bend," Vask replied, offering her a replacement junction node. "Half the colony's waiting for this drone lane to work again." "I know," she said, then paused, as she spotted the flickering sync indicator. Her eyes narrowed. "I think I've got it." She plugged the junction node into the scaffold, bypassing the Vexera feed with a Terran subshell scrubbed clean of origin tags. The drone relay blinked green, locked to orbit, and began transmitting a supply request packet, layered with alternating code sequences, one for Dominion interceptors, one for Earth's ghost freighters. Food shipments resumed. For now, Salkar spies embedded within Cypher High Command reported their first confirmed manipulation. Voron's advisors had fabricated evidence logs using time-stamped Loran codes that had been out of commission for cycles. These were publicly used to justify asset seizures across Dominion provinces, where Loran populations were highest. Civil unrest ignited along 8 different trade corridors within a single planetary cycle. On Vakar Station, near the gas harvesting fields of Othon Prime, Loran civilians staged sit-ins near transit hubs. Cypher peacekeepers arrived in overstrength numbers, and within 3 hours, 3 Loran administrators were dead. The footage circulated internally first. Then, curiously, through independent media outlets. The footage was grainy but authentic. Bodies, accusations, tear-cast grenades scattering through chambers meant for civilian arbitration. The footage had been leaked by humans. Back on Earth, Halvith stood before a red-lit table with operatives from the Sable Reach PsyOps division. Each man wore plain naval black, faces drawn. "Mine's already past this room." "Phase 2, Halvith said, without raising his voice. "Deploy 32 forged communiques over 20 Viquari channels. Style each as internal Loran faction dissent. Make it personal, not ideological. Include disputes over food allocations, trade rights, military obedience. Insert conflicting dates, force inconsistencies." A strategist nodded. "We can weave in footage from old council hearings. They'll believe it was buried for a reason. Use half-truths, not lies. Let the Dominion correct what they think is false, while internalizing what they fear is true." The order didn't just aim to erode control. It targeted identity, the glue of the Dominion's command chain. What one caste saw as treason, another would call necessary reform. What one sector saw as protection, another would deem escalation. And humans would never appear on the official records. 3 solar days later, a Vicari trade freighter, Ravaneth 6, disappeared in transit between Mid-Sector Delta and the Jaxer Loop. 6 hours after it vanished, Dominion long-range scanners flagged a distress beacon broadcasting near neutral space. Patrol ships found the vessel adrift inside a debris field. Its cargo holds had been stripped. Communications logs were scrambled. Navigation files were missing entire segments. The crew was discovered confined in their own quarters. Unharmed, unarmed, and unresponsive. Not one of them remembered the boarding. The last thing they recalled, scanning a beacon for routine entry clearance. After that, nothing. The incident exploded across internal channels. Loran loyalists demanded answers. Cypher officers began performing loyalty checks across Dominion fleets. Entire shipping lanes were reclassified, and protocols for intercaste oversight multiplied. It wasn't unity. It was fragility masked as control. And still, Earth had not sent a single official broadcast. Mira Tan adjusted her beacon relay on Calyx 4, now relinking 4 more colonies through scattered drone caches. Her hands bled through her gloves from slicing polyshell conduit against scavenged fusion coils. She keyed the mic. "Calyx 4 to Alara, Drone routes re-engaged. Repeat. Supply corridors holding. Packet code variant. Row 9. There was no reply. Just static, then a click. But the drone pings confirmed they'd heard her. She exhaled and leaned back against the wall. Behind her, a boy no older than 9 passed with a ration box. He didn't look at her. He only muttered, "We're not starving this week." Mira didn't smile. She didn't speak. She returned to the panel. Her relay beacon pulsed green. On Sable Reach, Halveth reviewed the first transmission analytics. 87% of Vakari internal reports were now issuing contradictory orders. 32 fleet signals had dropped entirely due to failed security authentications. Of those, 9 attempted rerouting through civilian channels, causing mass confusion as non-combat sectors received high-priority directives by mistake. He turned to Ven. "They're reacting exactly as expected. What's the next phase?" "Let them fall inward. We're not here to destroy the Dominion. We're here to show it never held." A Cipher officer's body hit the floor of the inner relay vault on Vakari Prime before his partner registered the knife drawn across his throat. Not clean, not ceremonial, messy. The kind of kill made when adrenaline outpaces training. His killer, a Dominion enforcer with no known allegiance to any caste, fled into the sub-relay tubes below the maintenance levels. By the time Command issued a full lockdown, the power grid controlling 3 districts glitched mid-second, and over 2,000 internal reports vanished from archival servers. Above ground, inside the Citadel's encrypted broadcast hall, Archseer Voran slammed a gauntlet against the data crypt. The display flared red. "If the Loran sabotage even a single more operations thread, we strip them of authority across every outer node." He barked to the communications director beside him. "No arbitration, no warnings. You route the edict now." The director hesitated. "We're already seeing resistance in 5 trade arms. Pulling oversight could fuel." "Do it," Voran hissed, eyes narrowing beneath the psionic ring. Across the system border, in the command chamber of Earth's Sable Reach vault, Commander Dren Halveth stared at the stream of internal Dominion reports. 80% were still being decrypted by his intelligence team, but one log already stood out. A Vakari Council transcript dated 1 week prior. Its metadata traced back to a cipher signal router, but the language, oddly, didn't match any Dominion code formatting. Halveth's eyes lingered on one phrase embedded mid-report. "Pattern breach traced to ghost data seeded prior to human neutrality accords." The line hadn't been written by a Vakari. It had been pulled, copied, and stitched into a Dominion report, then planted by Earth's own subsystems. He lowered the pad slowly. "They're reading our fingerprints, not their own." Kark Ven stepped forward, unsettled. "Should we abort Theta?" "No," Halveth replied, voice low and unwavering. "We launch Varnak." 3 words later, Earth's sabotage moved from subtle to surgical. Phase Varnak was never meant for planetary disruption. It targeted fleet structure directly. Authentication failure through logic corruption. 10 years ago, Earth's AI consultants had embedded paired redundancy failsafes into Vakari ship firmware, under the guise of shielding assistance during plasma turbulence. The moment those hidden routines activated, the Dominion's fleet recognition sequences began rejecting standard encryption handshakes. In the outer drift regions near the Garrus Belt, Vakari Patrol Squadron Kresh Delta lost contact with its flagship for exactly 12 seconds. When it re-established feed, the ship's positional data was 30 kilometers off Galactic, and its own escort class had marked it as an unverified emitter. And vessels emerged from behind the asteroids. Small, shielded, running cold. They weren't built for conquest. They were built to slice. In the next 12 minutes, communications fell into static distortion. Docking clamps unlocked through falsified orders. 4 Vakari cruisers were forcibly disabled without impact. The Dominion flagship Drenos Thay was boarded at Vector 12. Its command crew were captured using subkinetic stunners, blindfolded and restrained using their own squad-issued bindings. No fatalities, no data stolen, no system corrupted. After 12 hours, the ship was returned to the same orbit. The crew was left alive, weaponless, and confused, standing amid their bridge, as if waking from sedation. No one claimed responsibility, but the message was engineered into the act itself. Salkar sat alone in his strategy chamber. The walls no longer glowed. A single light pulsed from the overhead command spine, illuminating the chamber like a flickering heartbeat. He was reviewing system logs, one frame at a time. The same footage that had been presented to the psionic high table. The same footage Vorin had dismissed. He paused on a single frame, a freeze of the Gare's belt incursion. There, behind the ambush vector, lay a grav signature that didn't match any known propulsion trail in the Dominion registry. Then he saw it again, barely visible, blended with asteroid flare. Terran vectoring code, layered between displacement spikes. He pressed his fingers together tightly and activated a secure transmission channel that bypassed standard relay hubs. He routed it through a civilian comm frequency on neutral relay infrastructure, then encrypted it using Dominion trade code cipher libraries abandoned after the Delcaran conflict. When the connection linked, he said only one thing. "You've drawn blood without claws. I know it's you. And I know why." Helbut's reply came not through voice, but through an upload stream. Attached were 14 fabricated internal cipher reports, each one a mirror of the Dominion's current panic, but seeded with altered dates, shifted objectives, and signal crossover paths that implicated Vorin's chain of command in every critical failure since the blockade began. Salkar absorbed them in silence. This wasn't sabotage. This was orchestration. The next day, Vaqueri military archives were breached. Not physically, not through external networks. Instead, 2 identical authorization requests hit the same priority node from opposing ciphered outposts. The security protocol did what it had been trained to do. It locked down every adjacent archive until the conflicting IDs could be verified. The cascade took 6 minutes to spread. By the time Dominion High Command noticed, 27 tactical servers had gone dark, and backup systems began auto-wiping corrupted authentication chains to avoid data leakage. Vorin blamed Loran agents. He executed 7 commanders. Ben replaced half his intelligence team, but the damage was irreversible. With each new lockdown, Dominion fleets grew slower to respond. Patrols lost sector authority. Trade convoys hesitated to dock without full security checks. Entire chain of commander trees were being rebuilt every 3 days. Inside Earth's operations vault, Halfith reviewed a progress map. Every broken relay point appeared in yellow. Every false internal dispute was marked with a blinking green line. Ben stood behind him, arms folded. "We fractured their nervous system," he said. Halfith turned to the updated threat window. "Not yet," he replied, "but they've started eating their own hands." In orbit above Calyx 4, Dominion scout vessels attempted to reclassify the colony's local beacons. But Earth's counter-transmissions looped every calibration cycle, making it appear as though the colony had already been visited, already inspected, already secured. 3 ships arrived, rotated formation twice, then withdrew without even issuing ground orders. The sabotage wasn't visible. The confusion was. Below, Mira adjusted the relay beacon once more, adding a phase sync amplifier harvested from a buried mining drone. She didn't speak while she worked. The relay didn't buzz or chime. It ticked. Faint and mechanical, like a timekeeper recording history in real time. Calyx 4 remained untouched. On Vaqueri Prime, Vorin received a data packet with a single message. It was a quote, "Even your dead ships speak louder than your counsel." He crushed the data slab in his hand without speaking. Blood smeared across his sleeve. "Cut the Emperor out of the chain. I want jump-capable fleets at Sol within the hour." Archseer Vorin stood beneath the war room spire, staring at the tactical vault's projection wall, where Earth's planetary defense net shimmered as a simplified threat outline. Vaqueri admirals lined both sides of the chamber, each in standard cipher cuirass plate, hands locked behind their backs. Not one questioned him, not here, not now. The capital had descended into unrest. Oran territories flared with dissident energy, and internal data suggested half the Dominion fleet no longer followed core command unconditionally. Oran would end the spiral by decimating Earth's anchor systems. Sol was the nerve. Cut it, paralysis would follow. He placed his biometric ring into the interface socket. Order, Dominion override, redirect assault route via Kiroth Gate 2, burn through the outer rings, no transmission delay. I want Sol breached before they know which door we came through. The launch command was authenticated. Authorization beams lit along the side wall, and Dominion strike fleets rerouted across 3 staging sectors. Inside Earth's fleet coordination chamber at Sable Reach, Commander Dren Halveth read the inbound energy spike across outer system lines, eyes narrowing at the shift in pattern geometry. The Dominion ships weren't following their standard radial drift. They'd collapsed their formation into a toroid funnel, bypassing satellite-tracked relay buoys. Vorin had abandoned doctrine and bet everything on raw speed. It wasn't surprising. It was expected. Halveth turned to the Nari cell lead strategist, Karen Vask. Is Varnak Grid 3 active? Fully mapped, Vask replied, gesturing toward the interface. All false nodes locked and signal chained. They'll hit phantom gravity wells and think they're inside Earth's core vector. Run the decoy array, Halveth ordered. Let them come. 39 Vaquari warships breached the edge of Terran-designated space. They followed nav markers that matched Earth's beacon modulation and readouts verified by the Dominion's last chart update. Each vessel's tactical feed displayed orbital approximations of Earth's position. Wrong by design. Their AI tethers accepted the routing data without delay. Commanders aboard the leading frigates prepared targeting solutions and maneuvering spreads for a multi-vector bombardment. Then something shifted. Ship by ship, the beacons began rotating. Not physically, digitally. Earth's false nav Xaner, designed through 8 years of layered signal slight, pivoted mid-slight. Vaquari flagship, Vorthax Maroon, blinked out of formation first. Its propulsion readouts bouncing off inverted gravity fields generated from an artificial debris zone seeded 3 months earlier. Half the fleet followed the same drift, pulled through a maze of overlapping pulses mimicking terrain deflection. No ship could recalibrate quickly enough. Their fleet-wide synchronizers fractured under conflicting telemetry. Every Dominion ship believed it was flying in open formation. Every single one was alone. From the outer ring of the Arctan belt, hidden in the thermal dead zone between twin asteroid shells, Earth's Nari cell launched its assault. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't fire warning shots. They opened with pulse thrust disruptors targeting the Dominion's fleet-wide comm nodes, transmitting feedback waves through the very systems the Dominion had used to guide their approach. 2 Cypher dreadnoughts collided while realigning to avoid phantom debris signatures. Their outer hulls tore in opposite directions, oxygen vents rupturing like white geysers. A 3rd cruiser mistakenly engaged its defense grid and struck an escort craft that was already trying to signal a withdrawal. Within 16 minutes, Dominion formations lost unit coherence. Orders conflicted. Pilots shouted across interlinked feeds, unable to differentiate Allied ships from ambushers. Inside the command bridge of Corin Vale, an admiral ripped the side terminal from its socket when the crew routing system looped its own visual feed as live enemy telemetry. "This isn't battle," he shouted. "This is a graveyard with speakers." He didn't realize he was hearing the same loop broadcast Earth had been feeding through dead relay points. A war made from echoes. A strike built from lies wired into trust. Far below on Calyx 4, Mira Tan sat atop her relay tower as the colony's low sky churned from disrupted climate control fields. She held a field wrench in one hand, data tuner in the other, adjusting signal bleed from the upper bands. The new modifications weren't just passive shields. They reflected probe sweeps, mimicking Earth's orbital signal latency. Dominion ships hovering above believed Calyx was already overrun, scouted and controlled. She routed one last scramble wave through the outer relays, spiking the Dominion's attempt to reacquire beacon telemetry. Somewhere in orbit, a Vaquari fleet commander received a system-wide blank response to every locator ping. Back in Earth strike deck, Vask activated secondary launch. Initiate sweep fire under protocols row 5. No repeat hits. We don't want casualties. We want confusion. Halveth didn't respond. He stood with arms crossed, watching one Dominion destroyer spin on its axis, firing bursts at a ghost contact that didn't exist. The Neris cell ships fanned across the system, coordinated but invisible. They weren't after control. They were triggering tactical hysteria. Dominion pilots, stripped of guidance, acted independently. That was the final breakdown. When formation no longer held, unity died. The fleet turned inward, seeking order where there was none. 3 ships overloaded their reactors trying to brute force energy readings. One imploded in an arc flash that ruptured every sealed compartment aboard. 5 more vessels withdrew, collided with mines disguised as navigational boosters, and vented atmosphere across trails marked as safe by their own fleet 2 minutes earlier. By the end of the 3rd hour, 22 Vakari vessels were either adrift, offline, or firing blindly. And Earth hadn't lost a single ship. On Vakari Prime, Vorin screamed into the relay stream. Why haven't we received direct visual? Why are fleet captains operating on looped confirmations? Where is the real time? His comms officer didn't answer. Another display flickered, then held still. The screen showed an inverted star map. A fake sol system with layered data mismatches, set on an infinite loop. The trap wasn't just external. Earth had breached the dominion of perception. Down in Earth's strategic vault, Halveth folded the engagement file and turned to Ven. Send the C's range pulse. Ven raised an eyebrow. We're letting them limp away? We've shown them what happens when they trust their own senses. Halveth stared at the engagement report. Next time they won't trust anything. Vakari Battlegroup Orusk, fractured at 34 kilometers above the orbital layer of Rest Theta. The lead Cypher dreadnought veered off course by 17 degrees during a tactical fallback, unaware that Loran scout ships were broadcasting the same friend or foe frequency. When its defense AI flagged the mismatch, the ship's commander overrode the filter and opened fire. The blast caught the Loran cruiser along its underside, igniting atmosphere cells and venting 2 pressure bays. The returning salvo wasn't intentional. Loran ships had automated countermeasures set to mirror targeting behavior. A single strike turned into a crossfire that ignited a cascade. 6 ships perished before either side confirmed what they were shooting at. The jamming signal responsible came from a relay that didn't exist on Vakari maps. It wasn't traced. It wasn't meant to be. It was projected using rebounded feeds from already compromised communication towers across 7 colonies. By the time internal command recognized the glitch, 3 sectors had reclassified each other as rogue. Inside Sable Reach, Halveth stood beside the sector map display, watching it fracture in real time. We're not pushing them, said Ven, his expression hard. Halveth didn't blink. We don't have to. On Calyx 4, Mira's hands trembled from the charge surge as she braced a connection plate against a live power junction. She gritted her teeth as arcs jumped across the relay housing and threaded through the emergency broadcast system. When the surge settled, the colony's beacon lit red for exactly 3 seconds, then blinked into full operational green. Above, Earth's drone carriers crossed the orbital plane without incident. Dominion surveillance ships, confused by the mirrored beacon output, ignored the landing signatures entirely. Mira stepped back from the console, fingers blistered, knees weak from dehydration. We're operational, Roan Vask muttered beside her, his voice strained but steady. She nodded once. Get the supplies down. Keep every channel dead for 10 minutes after the last crate hits dirt. What if they check back? She wiped blood across her jacket and walked out. They won't know what they're checking for. Over the next 14 hours, 8 Earth colonies reclaimed control of their resource hubs without engaging in combat. Not a single orbital cannon fired. No enemy landing units arrived. The Dominion systems, previously hardened through psionic encryption, now operated in recursive loops, receiving identical requests from mirror-coded beacons Earth had implanted months ago. Supply drones landed uninterrupted. Power networks rebooted. Local comms lit up with instructions piggybacked through backdoor Vakari maintenance bands. What the Dominion thought were system pings from inspection squads were Terran recovery commands, masked by synthetically degraded frequencies. By hour 16, Earth controlled everything the Dominion thought was still blocked. At the Dominion Citadel on Vaqueri Prime, Vorin's personal guard escorted him through the inner corridors with expressionless faces. Their weapons remained holstered. That was unusual. He adjusted his stride, turning his head slightly. "Report," he said to the lead sentinel. "I haven't received orbital logs for our remaining eastern flank. Confirm transmission delay or rebuffer immediately." No reply. He halted. "Commander Dreville, you will acknowledge your archseer now." Still nothing. Vorin's brow tightened. His internal implant triggered a query to the nearest command console. The system ignored the request. The hallway lights dimmed, not from atmospheric fluctuation, but from manual override. He was being walked into a vault. Not a war chamber. Not a council hall. A vault. He turned, but Dreville struck him hard across the mouth with the back of his gauntlet. Vorin collapsed sideways, hitting the curved chamber wall. His psionic ring pulsed defensively, but no data channel opened. His command link had been severed. He tried to activate internal override code. The implant returned a looped error. He looked up. There were 8 guards, none from Lauren. All cipher. Dreville spoke without affect. "You placed us against ourselves. You turned a mistake into a doctrine." "I stopped collapse," Vorin spat, blood pooling between his teeth. "You started it," Dreville corrected, then drew his shock blade. It was not quick. When the chamber sealed, Vorin's body remained on the stone platform beneath the Dominion crest. The floor still pulsed with system heat from the inactive psionic projectors. Tools Vorin had used to override the Emperor's authority, now flickering without command. His head lay 3 feet from his torso. His command badge had been burned into the floor, a final act of symbolic severance. Dreville left the chamber without ceremony. His guards didn't speak. Within 20 hours of Vorin's execution, Dominion Central Coordination collapsed. Fleet relays entered a deadlock loop when multiple admirals issued contradicting movement orders. Systems designed for top-down structure couldn't accommodate simultaneous priority commands from equal rank officers. 35% of the Navy disconnected from central orders and began operating on regional instinct. Loran representatives attempted to mediate, but most command decks had already purged Loran personnel by then. 15 civilian hubs declared unilateral autonomy. 5 outer provinces shut down psionic communications entirely and returned to analog coordination. 2 command chains rerouted their loyalty pledges to Emperor Salkar directly, bypassing the Council. By hour 42, the Dominion no longer existed in any centralized form. Alvith sat inside the Sable Reach vault, gloves resting on the dark edge of the data table. His team operated quietly behind him, voices muted, every movement calculated. "We didn't touch their throne," said Ven, standing at the side wall reading transmission logs. "We didn't need to," Halveth replied. "They dragged it down themselves." A pause settled over the room. Not emptiness, not relief, just stillness before recalibration. Halveth stood. "Contact the reclamation teams. Tell them there's no more blockade, just echoes." Halveth stood at the edge of the Sable Reach command chamber, boots planted against the matte flooring that once carried the tremors of pre-war simulations. Now the floor was still. No drills, no simulated alerts. Only silence, broken by a slow mechanical signature tick from the data pad in his hand, as final logs came in from the outer colonies. "Confirm sector status," he said, not raising his voice. Ven, seated opposite him across the low operations table, ran one final diagnostic across Earth's reactivation grid. Calyx, Elian, Saru, all restored. Civilian systems running independently. Dominion presence, 0. Last Vaquari signal vanished 4 hours ago. Halveth didn't smile. He lowered the pad and gave a nod to the relay tech in the wall-side comm alcove. "Notify Council Command," he said. "Operation Coil Frame is concluded. No further escalation. Standing order is stabilization. He walked to the center podium and tapped in the exit protocol. The battle designation vanished from the main console. His team didn't cheer. There was no applause. They understood. Victory meant nothing unless they walked away without planting a flag. The Sovereign Reversal Pact wasn't written in negotiation chambers or council forums. It was carved into the response grid itself, drafted through action and finalized through withdrawal. Earth's strategy team assembled the terms aboard CRS Tanith, a diplomatic carrier rigged for long-range transmission. The document outlined every clause in sterile language. No annexation of Dominion territory. No seizure of infrastructure. No reparations requested. All systems previously influenced by Vekwari psionic networks would be independently governed. All Earthline colonies would remain under Terran civil administration with full sovereignty. The purpose was not conquest, it was neutralization of future risk. Dominion control systems would be dismantled and Earth would not interfere further unless provoked. The agreement was prepared in 34 hours. It required no ratification. The document would transmit itself to every known Vekwari node, every adjacent civilization, and every neutral relay. It wasn't an offer. It was a new constant. On Calyx 4, Mira leaned over the final beacon adjustment panel. Her bandaged fingers tightened around the stabilizer handle as she locked the last pulse array into its mount. She checked the signal loop, then routed it through a delay buffer keyed to Earth's master frequency. A low-frequency thump reverberated through the lower decks as the long-range transmitter came online. She blinked, threw sweat streaks, and opened the main line. "This is Calyx Control Beacon 7, Civilian Authority reinstated. Relay ready for forward broadcast. Clearance protocol confirmed." From orbit, CRS Tanith acknowledged. The beacon flared green, and the message began cycling. Inside the Earth Broadcast Control Node, an operator ran Mira's audio feed through the alignment chamber. The signal was processed, amplified, and converted into a multi-spectrum pulse designed to penetrate layered Vekwari infrastructure, civil, military, diplomatic. The message was brief. Mira's voice, strained but clear, carried every syllable. "We have no interest in dominion. We have no appetite for tribute. We only respond to violation. Let this be the final metric of cause and consequence. You interfere, we erase. You withdraw, we rebuild. We don't return unless called. Do not make that call again." The broadcast didn't end with a declaration. It simply stopped. The line dropped. The cycle began anew. Across the galaxy, that feed repeated through 27 neutral relay networks. On Vekwari Prime, what remained of the central administration reviewed the packet inside a crisis vault with dampened walls. The planetary council chamber had been abandoned. Psionic network conduits overloaded days prior. Now, 5 representatives sat around a transport crate turned makeshift table, watching Mira's message repeat on a salvage relay viewer. One delegate closed his eyes after the third playthrough. "They're not here." Another, younger and from the disbanded Navigation Bureau, shook his head slowly. "They never came to conquer, only to disconnect us." None of them spoke again for several minutes. There was nothing to negotiate. The pact contained no terms to argue. On Earth, Halveth entered the command seal chamber alone. The walls bore no flags. The air carried no scent of fuel or corrosion, only recycled breath and dust from long-abandoned briefing scrolls stacked in the alcoves. He placed the black sealed tablet, unmarked, cold to the touch, onto the table's center. "Log complete," he said. "Directive fulfilled. Earth holds no dominion, demands no return. Defer all future escalation to defensive doctrine only." The seal accepted his biometric print. Its outer surface illuminated once, then dimmed as the record finalized. At the Civilian Council Tower in the Terran capital, Mira stepped into the old media archive where her broadcast now ran across every table and wall slab. She stood with hands behind her back, watching her own voice carry a doctrine that now rewrote how the galaxy understood power. A counselor approached and offered her a data slab. They're calling it the doctrine of distance. She didn't take it. They'll dress it up, make it ceremonial. Mira turned to him. Let them. As long as they understand we're not visitors. The counselor raised an eyebrow. Not visitors? She nodded slowly. We're the boundary line they can't redraw. Helveth stood aboard a decommissioned warship now docked at Terrancore Reserve. No weapons. No engines lit. The ship existed as a reminder, visible from the orbital cities, floating against a glare of Earth's polar sunrise. He traced his fingers across its hull, then turned as an ensign arrived with the final relay report. Entire sector quiet, the ensign said. No Dominion broadcasts, most of the neutral zones are now requesting contact procedures. Helveth nodded once. Send them the format, and let them know. Our doors aren't locked, they're just weighted. The air in the neutral station's upper tier carried the sterile chill of recycled systems, overdue for calibration. Not decay. Not disrepair. Just the residue of long-forgotten maintenance protocols that had served function over hospitality. The room had no banners, no ceremonial furniture, and no escort posted at the entrance. One chair on either side of a featureless glass table, no names, no emblems, no rank acknowledged. Bryn Helveth entered first. He carried no pad, no weapon. He wore the same dark command coat used during Operation Coil Frame. Sleeves rolled down, collar sealed, gloves stowed in his back pocket. He didn't sit. He examined the room, scanning with a slow gaze until he confirmed what he already suspected. They wanted this to feel unfinished. Behind him, the door slid open with a mechanical scrape. No guards preceded the man who stepped through. Salkar Thune moved like someone whose injuries had not fully healed. Not physical wounds, but the slower kind. Displacement, authority burned out of habit. His posture remained upright, but his gait faltered slightly when he approached the table. The robe he wore had once held rank, tapered cuffs, neural reinforcement nodes, embedded status threads that used to pulse psionic activity. All inert now. His command regalia had been stripped of influence, its identifiers erased. He didn't acknowledge it. He took the chair opposite Helveth. The door sealed behind him. No one spoke for 19 seconds. Then Salkar leaned forward, placing both hands palm down on the table. His fingers trembled, only slightly. I warned them, he said, not as an excuse, not as regret, as record. Helveth didn't reply. Salkar exhaled slowly. They read your actions like scripts. They thought you'd need power to shape an outcome. They didn't consider that suggestion might be the sharper tool. You were part of that machine, Helveth said. You built its walls. I tried to reinforce them from collapse, Salkar replied. Not from enemies, from arrogance. My mistake was believing they'd listen if I couched my words in strategy instead of fear. Helveth's eyes didn't shift. Then they fell exactly how you structured them. Salkar straightened, not in defense but to reposition his tone. What you did to our command flow. It wasn't just warfare. You unbound the system from itself. Do you know what that does to a culture that defines identity through order? I didn't design your identity, Helveth said. You embedded that fragility into your own chains. We just moved when you rattled them. The former emperor's expression darkened, not with anger but weariness. You fractured an empire without claiming it. You struck a military without firing directly. You destabilized a legacy by walking away. That terrifies them more than conquest ever would. Helveth remained seated, still, unblinking. Salkar's voice lowered. I saw it the moment Theta activated. We had no contingency for erosion. Every Vaquari doctrine was shaped by resistance to impact, not dissolution. Helveth tapped the table once, not loud, just enough to punctuate. Impact is loud. It draws defense. Dissolution slides beneath it. Salkar allowed the pause to linger. History will remember you as the man who redefined escalation, he said finally. Not through power, through discipline. Helveth stood. He didn't thank him. He didn't acknowledge the compliment. He looked toward the blank far wall, where no display shimmered, no records projected. "There's no ceremony here," he said. "Either shouldn't be. No statement. I wasn't brought to confess." Halveth turned. "You didn't come to warn again." Salkar shook his head slowly. "They already wrote my warning off as weakness. There's nothing left to protect. Only the echo of what I couldn't prevent." Halveth looked at the robe. The discoloration in the fabric where command nodes used to pulse with signal energy. The empty space where a Dominion crest had once been sewn, torn off without care. "You still wear it," he said. "It's the only weight they let me keep." Halveth stepped around the table, stopping beside the former emperor. Not close enough to crowd him, just enough to ensure the next words wouldn't echo through a comm stream or report log. "We didn't come to punish," he said quietly. "We came to end the game." Salkar's head tilted slightly. "Then why leave me alive?" "Because history doesn't listen to corpses." Halveth walked to the door. As it opened, the cold, recycled air from the corridor filtered across his coat. He didn't turn around. Salkar sat unmoving, hands still resting on the edge of the table. He looked down at them. "It wasn't wrong," he said aloud to no one. "Only too early." The door closed behind Halveth. He didn't speak again. Salkar Thune's final statement never aired through Vikwari broadcast relays. It wasn't recorded by his handlers, nor did it pass through official security. It was relayed word for word by a Terran diplomatic observer who stood in the same empty room hours later, silently copying it into Earth's interstellar archive. It was then verified by 3 neutral delegates and etched into the tribunal's codex without amendment. You cannot deter them by threat, nor bind them by treaty. Once Earth begins, you are already reacting too late. The Galactic Tribunal ratified that line into Section 1 of the updated Interstellar Deterrence Framework. Not as policy. As truth. There was no debate. There was no challenge. No empire wanted to be remembered as the one who tested it again. 3 cycles later, a closed summit was held aboard the Express's core archive, the floating capital of the neutral Concord. 32 species attended. 14 of them had in some capacity either allied with or opposed the Dominion during its rise. Not a single representative mentioned reparations. Not one asked Earth for restitution. No speaker invoked vengeance or offered aid to the shattered regime. Instead, they dissected Earth's doctrine with the language of survival. Advisors presented case files on Theta, Varnic, and the Phantom V broadcast operations. Diagrams were rendered in physical models to understand how Earth used perception as a weapon. One delegation from the Thrian cartel referred to the Terran playbook as warfare through narrative distortion. Another simply called it empathic inversion. They didn't come to condemn it. They came to imitate it. In the broken core of the former Dominion, no government rose to restore the hierarchy. The central psionic relay system, once the foundation of command authority, remained unrepaired. Too many nodes had been wiped or reprogrammed. Attempts to synchronize them resulted in static feedback loops, or contradictory responses that shorted entire navigation decks. With no throne, no seer, and no recognized fleet control, the remnants of the Dominion fragmented across 6 autonomous districts. No single name held sway. However, Earth's broadcast codex had labeled them once during the withdrawal sequence, the unpaused. It had been an offhand procedural tag for incomplete AI shutdown. Now, the galaxy adopted the name for the fractured empire that had failed to surrender, failed to respond, and failed to endure. The unpaused drifted through the neutral corridors of space, occasionally issuing outdated commands to non-existent fleets, often negotiating for supplies under aliases, and not one of them dared transmit toward Earth. At the Earth Central Registry, located within the subterranean levels of the Terran Strategic Archive, a single data console displayed the final movement logs of the Dominion campaign. The table's interface was unadorned. Black surface, no ornamentation. Just a single title inscribed along the top rail. Threat duration, 112 hours. The archive didn't celebrate the number, it simply recorded it. Below that, a secondary field read, collateral, Minimal. Victory claimed? None. Territory held? None. Earth's doctrine had not required banners, trophies, or memorials. Its only artifact was Mira Tan's voice, looping once every 3 months through neutral relay points, as part of the post-conflict signal identification packet. Each time her words repeated, diplomatic channels shifted their priorities, border disputes quieted, trade disruptions stabilized, aggressive rhetoric from rising powers fell dormant in policy debates. No empire wanted their name written beside the word corrected. Inside a classroom on Thesser's education ring, a young instructor walked a cluster of adolescents through a comparative history slide. She paused at a segment showing an old Dominion fleet map, marked in faded red. What ended the Vicquari expansion? One student asked. She gestured to the next slide, an empty star field overlaid with one Terran relay beacon active. AI interfered, and Earth recalibrated them. But Earth didn't conquer them, said another. Why not take everything? The instructor tilted her head. Because Earth doesn't teach submission. It teaches restraint as dominance. The room fell still. The lesson moved forward. On Calyx 4, Mira stood alone on the relay balcony. The sky overhead was fractured amber, colored by the seasonal radiation shield arcing overhead. She adjusted the input plate, rerouting signal verification cycles, then checked the time drift correction. From orbit, CRS Teneth pinged the colony with a standard calibration sweep. She keyed in the final confirmation code and leaned on the rail, watching the twin moons rise between the peaks. Her hands were still rough from those early repairs. Scar lines faded but never erased. Her voice was still used in relays she'd never stepped foot near. And her name was now listed in 3 defense libraries as a model for non-combat strategic communications. None of it had been her ambition. But history didn't require consent, just evidence. In the shadow of Earth's equatorial docking ring, Commander Halvith stood inside the observation annex. The floor beneath him vibrated faintly with structural sync pulses, timed tremors from the planet's magnetic calibration fields. He looked out the reinforced viewport at the inactive warships suspended in geosynchronous hold. 30 of them, each fully operational, each disengaged. He folded his arms and spoke softly. If we ever launch again, we'll do it without buildup. Without announcements. Ven, standing beside him, adjusted his sleeve. The others think we have fleets on standby. Halveth nodded. Let them. What happens when one of them forgets? Debbie won't forget, Halveth replied. Not after Thune's warning made it into doctrine. Ben raised an eyebrow. You think anyone still hears that line? Halveth exhaled, barely audible. They don't need to hear it. It's already rewritten how they think. Behind them, the doors opened. No orders were issued, no alerts called. Nothing needed to be said. Earth had finished moving. If that ending left a mark, sound off in the comments. Was Halveth right to walk away? Or should humanity have finished what it started? Hit subscribe if you're here for stories where humans don't beg for respect. They become the reason fear exists.